Chapter 1, 12th place. Every military census in the conquered agreed on one fact. Humanity possessed the 12th largest navy. The figure appeared in strategic briefings, trade negotiations, academy textbooks, and the annual fleet balance report. It was not an estimate. Conquered inspectors had visited Terran naval bases, counted active hulls, reviewed construction records, and verified every registered weapons platform from Sol to the frontier colonies. The Terran Union operated 812 commissioned warships. The Nethari coalition possessed more than 4,000. The Asari protectorates maintained 3,000 long-range missile vessels. Even the peaceful Pelagic Combine fielded a larger formal navy because its drifting habitat cities required heavily armed escorts. Human officers never disputed the ranking. When other delegations boasted about fleet strength, the Terrans usually nodded, drank their coffee, and asked whether anyone had updated the maintenance schedules. Grand Admiral Serac Von considered that humility sensible. He was Nethari, commander of the conquered combined fleet, and responsible for defending 37 member civilizations from threats most citizens preferred not to imagine. Von had spent 40 years studying military capability. He trusted tonnage, acceleration, weapons yield, crew readiness, and logistics endurance. He did not trust reputations. The Terran Navy had a good reputation. Its ships were sturdy, its officers adaptable, and its enlisted crews irritatingly capable of repairing equipment that should have been scrapped. None of that changed arithmetic. 812 warships were 812 warships. The number mattered on the morning the Varkesh crossed the frontier. The first warning came from the Asari listening station at Cinder Reach. 8 minutes later, the station ceased transmitting. 12 minutes after that, a refugee packet arrived through emergency channels containing images of black ships unfolding from jump space in disciplined formations. The Varkesh were not raiders. They were not pirates or separatists. They were a migrating empire. Their fleets had consumed 3 civilizations beyond the Eastern Dark, stripping industrial worlds for materials and relocating surviving populations into labor enclaves. Conquered intelligence had tracked rumors for decades but had never confirmed their scale. Now scale filled every tactical display in combined fleet command. Admiral Von stood before the central projection while officers counted enemy signatures. 10,000, then 20, then 40. The number stabilized at 63,000 major hulls, with perhaps twice that many support vessels. No one spoke for several seconds. The Conquered's combined active navies totaled 28,000 warships. Many were stationed months away. Several member governments refused to release home defense squadrons until their own borders were threatened. A staff officer whispered that the numbers had to be wrong. Von replied that numbers did not become wrong merely because they were frightening. He ordered every member fleet to mobilize. The Terran representative, Admiral Lee Morita, stood near the rear of the command tier. She was compact, gray-haired, and wore the plain black uniform of the Terran Union Navy without ceremonial cords. Von turned toward her. Admiral Morita, how quickly can Earth concentrate its fleet at the Kestrel line? Morita checked her tablet before answering. The commissioned Navy can place 640 combat-ready hulls there within 18 days. Another 92 can arrive inside 30. Less than Von had hoped, though not less than he expected. And after that, he asked. Morita looked up. After that, Admiral, the rest of humanity arrives. Von assumed she meant troops. He would later remember that assumption with embarrassment. Chapter 2, the Fleet Balance Report. The Emergency Council met 6 hours later. Representatives appeared in person, by secure projection, or through translation avatars whose expressions could not conceal panic. The Varkesh had already taken 2 frontier systems and were advancing along 3 corridors. Grand Admiral Von presented the operational picture without softening it. The Conquered could hold the Kestrel line if every member committed immediately. If the line failed, the enemy would gain access to 7 industrial systems and the central transit web. Councillor Merk Thane of Earth listened from the Terran seat with his hands folded over a paper notebook. Speaker Selka Rune recognized him after the major naval powers had pledged forces. Councillor Thane, she said, the Terran Union has confirmed 640 ships. Can your government increase that commitment? Yes, Thane replied. We are activating the Civil Defense Mobilization Accord. Chamber paused. The translation systems rendered the phrase accurately but without context. An Nethari delegate asked whether the accord concerned planetary shelters. Among other things, Thane said. Grand Admiral Von opened a private data window and searched the Conquered archives. The accord appeared in a 300-year-old Terran legal filing. Its public summary described procedures for coordinating civilian transport during natural disasters, mass evacuations, and infrastructure failures. Require warships, Vaughn said carefully, not evacuation ferries. Thane nodded. Understood. Then what exactly are you activating? Everything that floats. Several delegates shifted in confusion. Thane continued before anyone could interrupt. The Terran Union Navy is our formal combat arm. It is not the full measure of our mobilization capacity. Earth requests immediate access to conquered fuel depots, route priority, and temporary recognition of Terran reserve commissions. The Asari defense minister spread her wings. How many reserve warships do you possess? Very few, Thane replied. Vaughn felt frustration rising. Counselor, we do not have time for rhetorical distinctions. How many armed vessels can humanity deploy? Thane glanced toward Admiral Morita. She answered. That depends on how much warning we receive, what conversion packages are authorized, and whether your governments permit civilian hulls to enter military traffic networks. A number, Admiral. Within 30 days, approximately 11,000 vessels capable of fleet service. The chamber became silent. Vaughn stared at her. Your registered navy contains 812 warships. Correct. Where are the other 10,000? Delivering cargo, surveying stars, mining asteroids, towing stations, carrying passengers, maintaining relays, teaching cadets, moving hospitals. A pelagic delegate rotated slowly inside his water sphere. Those are not warships. Morita's expression did not change. No, they are ships. Vaughn pulled up the latest fleet balance report and sent the Terran section to the central display. The inspection categories are explicit, he said. Commissioned combatants, armed auxiliaries, military transports, reserve hulls, and strategic construction capacity. Humanity ranked 12th. Morita studied the document. You counted exactly what the report asked you to count. What did it fail to ask? She enlarged the section defining military compatibility. A vessel qualified only if it carried permanently installed military-grade drives, weapons, armor, command systems, or dedicated troop facilities. Humans dislike permanently dedicated equipment, Morita explained. It is expensive and most emergencies are not wars. She replaced the report with an image of an ordinary Terran cargo ship. This is the TUS Cedar Falls. It carries grain between 5 colonies. Its cargo spine accepts standardized modules. Its reactor has 30% reserve output. Its navigation core can join a naval battle network. Half its crew are reservists. The hull contains mounting points for point defense clusters, electronic warfare arrays, medical bays, fuel bladders, or missile canisters. A Veyer minister leaned closer to his display. It is a disguised cruiser. No, Morita said. It is a very honest freighter. The grain is real. Then why build it this way? Because grain ships sometimes become evacuation ships, hospital ships, firefighting ships, repair ships, or tugs. Standardization lets us change what they do without replacing the hull. Vaughn looked again at the projected freighter. It did not resemble a warship. That, he began to understand, was the point. Chapter 3, Everything That Floats. Captain Elias Ward received the mobilization order while docking at New Rotterdam Station. His ship, the Cedar Falls, carried 60,000 tons of frozen wheat protein and a crew of 23. She had no armor worth naming, no offensive weapons, and a hull broad enough to make naval architects wince. Ward read the order twice, then opened the shipwide channel. All crew, this is the captain. The Civil Defense Mobilization Accord is active. Finish cargo transfer and report reserve status to the bridge. Anyone declining service may disembark without penalty. Chief Engineer Mina Bacco arrived first, wiping lubricant from her hands. She was 62, had served 8 years in the Navy, and complained whenever anyone called her retired. Conversion code? She asked. Blue 7. Bacco gave a low whistle. Fleet support and defensive combat. They expect trouble. The Varkesh crossed Cinder Reach. Her expression sharpened. How bad? Bad enough that everything floats. Within 20 minutes, 21 of the 23 crew had accepted reserve activation. The remaining 2 were a newly married cargo technician and a cook caring for an ill parent. Ward signed their releases personally and arranged passage home. New crew arrived before the grain finished unloading. Naval communications specialists, damage control personnel, a surgeon, 6 missile technicians who regarded the freighter's empty cargo spine with professional hunger. Then the modules came. They arrived on automated crawlers from warehouses built into the station's inner ring. Point defense turrets locked into hardpoints hidden beneath removable hull panels. Sensor pallets slid into the forward cargo bays. A prefabricated combat information center connected to the ship's power and data trunks. Fuel bladders filled 2 holds. Repair drones occupied another. The final module contained 144 long-range defensive missiles. Ward watched through the bridge cameras as technicians bolted the container into place. Lieutenant Sana Ito, the newly assigned weapons officer, stood beside him. "Does that make us a warship?" Ward asked. Ito considered the question. "Legally, Captain, it makes us a naval auxiliary with temporary defensive combat authority." "That sounds less alarming. The missiles remain equally alarming." Across human space, the same transformation occurred at impossible scale. Passenger liners surrendered luxury decks for casualty wards and troop berths. Mining vessels replaced ore pods with armor repair shops. Survey ships became reconnaissance platforms. Orbital tugs accepted shield generators and tractor control upgrades. Coast Guard cutters received military targeting software. University exploration vessels loaded sensor buoys and reserve officers who had not worn uniforms in 20 years. Fishing fleets from ocean worlds contributed refrigerated storage. Construction barges carried prefabricated fortifications. Fuel haulers formed mobile depots. Courier companies placed their fastest ships under naval dispatch. None became a battleship. Together, they became everything battleships required in order to remain battleships. The formal navy concentrated for combat. Civilian hulls absorbed the rest: fuel, food, ammunition, repairs, intelligence, communications, evacuation, medical support, replacement crews, and the endless movement of parts. Admiral Morita's staff did not organize them from nothing. The organization already existed. Every Terran merchant license included emergency communication protocols. Every major civilian hull used compatible docking standards. Reserve commissions were renewed through routine simulator training. Cargo manifests could be transferred into military logistics networks with a software key. Insurance law compensated owners for mobilized vessels. Labor contracts defined hazard pay before the first shot was fired. The system was not secret. It was merely boring enough that no foreign intelligence service had studied it closely. 3 days after the Accord activated, Grand Admiral Vaughn received an updated Terran readiness estimate. 11,000 vessels had been conservative. Humanity had acknowledged 28,000 hulls suitable for some form of fleet service. Another 46,000 could support planetary defense, local transport, or industrial production. Vaughn called Admiral Morita immediately. "How many ships do you actually possess?" he demanded. Morita sounded tired. "That depends on what you mean by possess. How many vessels can answer your orders? Direct orders, approximately 12,000, contractual tasking, 30,000 more, voluntary coordination. We are still counting. You do not know the size of your own fleet." "We know the size of our navy," Morita replied. "The fleet is forming now." Chapter 4, The Kestrel Line. The first battle at the Kestrel Line lasted 19 hours. The Conquered won. It did not feel like victory. The Varkesh advanced in dense formations protected by layered shields and clouds of autonomous attack craft. Their commanders treated ships as replaceable pieces in a mathematical exchange. They drove directly toward the line, accepting losses that would have broken most fleets. Grand Admiral Vaughn's forces held because the defenders knew the terrain, and because Terran missile squadrons found a weakness in the enemy shield cycle. They also held because the Cedar Falls and ships like her refused to let the defenders run dry. Captain Ward's freighter entered the combat zone 4 hours after firing began. The tactical display showed thousands of contacts, warning icons, and debris paths. No civilian captain was supposed to see a sky that crowded. Lieutenant Ito stood at the combat console, receiving fleet assignments. "Destroyer Group Hale has expended 80% of its interceptors," she reported. "Cruiser Patience has reactor damage and requires coolant. 3 Asari vessels need compatible oxygen reserve cartridges." Ward glanced at Chief Baco. "Can we help all of them?" "Not at the same time." The fleet network assigned priorities, but Ward had learned that automated priorities became unreliable when every problem was marked critical. "Call them," he said. Ito looked over. "All 3. The computers are already arguing. Let the captains join in." The conversation lasted 40 seconds. The Hale group could survive 15 more minutes. The Patience would lose propulsion in 9. The Asari ships possessed emergency masks but could not remain at combat stations indefinitely. Ward changed course toward the cruiser. The Cedar Falls moved through the rear of the battle line while Baco's engineers prepared a coolant transfer. Varkesh drones broke through defensive coverage and accelerated toward the freighter. Ito's new missile crew tracked them. "Permission to engage?" she asked. Ward gripped the armrests as the ship began evasive thrust. "Defend the ship!" The cargo module opened. Missiles launched in disciplined waves, not toward the Varkesh capital ships, but into the drone formation. Point-defense turrets filled the darkness with precise fire. The Cedar Falls shuddered as fragments struck her outer plating. She was not built to trade blows. She was built to keep working despite accidents, poor docking, micrometeorites, neglected ports, and captains who postponed maintenance by one more voyage. That toughness mattered. The drones died. The freighter reached the Patience with 3 minutes remaining. Magnetic clamps secured a transfer hose while both ships continued accelerating. Coolant flowed. Repair drones crossed the gap carrying replacement conduits. The cruiser restored propulsion and returned to formation. Then the Cedar Falls delivered interceptors to the Hale Group and oxygen cartridges to the Asari. She repeated the pattern until her holds were nearly empty. Around her, thousands of converted civilian vessels performed the same quiet miracles. Tugs pulled damaged ships beyond the firing line. Hospital liners received casualties faster than naval shuttles could deliver them. Mining craft used industrial lasers to cut trapped crews from wreckage. Survey ships mapped Varkesh jump distortions. Couriers carried physical data cores when jamming disrupted networks. By the battle's end, the Conquered had lost 912 warships. The Varkesh had lost more than twice that number and withdrawn. Grand Admiral Von reviewed the casualty projections. Under normal assumptions, the Conquered fleet would require 6 months to restore combat readiness. Terran logistics estimated 23 days. Von summoned Admiral Morita to his command ship. "Your auxiliaries performed well," he told her. They performed their jobs. Their jobs were not military operations. Today they were. Von displayed the fleet status map. Terran repair vessels already surrounded damaged ships. Mobile factories produced replacement components. Fuel convoys were moving before local depots submitted requests. "You planned this," he said. Morita sat across from him. "We prepared for it. Planning would imply we knew which war would happen." "Why?" "Because our history contains too many examples of needing more ships than the Navy owned. Most civilizations solve that by building a larger navy. Most civilizations do not have human taxpayers." For the first time since the invasion began, Von laughed. It lasted only a moment. Then a new report appeared. The Varkesh withdrawal was not a retreat. It was reconnaissance. Their main fleet had not yet arrived. Chapter 5, What a Fleet is For. Second Varkesh wave contained 120,000 ships. Not all were combatants, but enough were. Their strategy became clear. The first attack had measured the Kestrel line. The second would bypass it. Varkesh formation split into 6 invasion corridors aimed at shipyards, fuel systems, and food-producing worlds. They did not need to destroy the combined fleet. They intended to collapse the civilization supporting it. Grand Admiral Von's staff produced 17 defensive plans. Every plan failed somewhere. If he concentrated at the shipyards, agricultural systems would fall. If he defended the population centers, fuel infrastructure would be destroyed. If he divided the fleet, the Varkesh would overwhelm each group in detail. Admiral Morita studied the projections in silence. "You have an alternative," Von said. "Yes, I recognize that expression." Morita enlarged a map of Terran mobilization routes. "Stop defending infrastructure as fixed points." Von stared at her. "Planets cannot move. The useful parts can." The Terran proposal was called distributed continuity. Instead of protecting every shipyard, humanity would disperse construction capacity across mobile factories, civilian docks, mining platforms, and repair ships. Fuel stores would be divided among thousands of tankers. Strategic food reserves would be loaded aboard freighters. Government archives would be duplicated onto courier craft. Hospitals would establish evacuation networks before bombardment began. The Varkesh would capture systems and discover that much of what made them valuable had already departed. Other member governments objected immediately. Industrial ministries refused to surrender control of factories. Local admirals feared losing fuel reserves. Planetary leaders worried that evacuation preparations would cause panic. Morita did not argue that their concerns were foolish. She argued that they were late. At an emergency session, Councillor Thane addressed the member governments. "A fleet is not a collection of warships," he said. "A fleet is the movement of a civilization through danger. If your factories cannot move, move their tools. If your hospitals cannot move, move their patients. If your archives cannot move, copy them. If your command structure cannot survive losing a building, then your building is the enemy's most valuable weapon." The Pelagic Combine adopted the plan first. Their civilization already lived aboard migratory habitats and understood mobility instinctively. The Asari followed after Terran engineers demonstrated that orbital farm modules could be detached and towed. The Nethari government resisted until Grand Admiral Vaughn publicly supported the proposal. "The enemy has counted our fortresses," he told his people. "We will make the count useless." Conversion accelerated. The Cedar Falls received a new assignment, Convoy Command for Continuity Group 7. Captain Ward's convoy included grain carriers, machine tool transports, refugee liners, 3 mobile hospitals, a reactor foundry barge, 2 university ships, 7 mining vessels, 12 escorts, and an entire government records office whose clerks occupied temporary cabins between cargo holds. No naval doctrine had a category for it. The fleet network called it a strategic mobility formation. The crews called it the neighborhood. Ward discovered that commanding it required less tactical genius than patience. The hospital ships demanded smooth acceleration. The mining vessels demanded fuel. The refugee liners demanded certainty no one could provide. The government clerks demanded bandwidth. The escorts demanded everyone remain in formation. Chief Baco listened to the arguments and offered a diagnosis. "This is not a convoy," she said. "It is a city with engine trouble." Ward nodded. "Then we govern it like one." He created a council of ship captains, engineers, doctors, and civilian representatives. They met twice daily by secure channel. Problems were raised before they became emergencies. Ships traded supplies without waiting for central approval. Faster vessels carried messages through jamming. Children aboard the refugee liners attended remote classes taught by professors from the university ships. The neighborhood moved. When Varkesh scouts entered the abandoned system behind them, they found empty fuel tanks, dismantled factories, cold docks, and a note transmitted from an automated beacon. The message contained 6 words. "You arrived after the important part left." Chapter 6, The Fleet No One Commanded. The Concord's military hierarchy had a problem. Humanity's mobilized fleet was too large to command in the traditional sense. No admiral could issue detailed orders to tens of thousands of civilian vessels. Many captains were not subject to military law. Some ships belonged to independent colonies, corporations, unions, universities, religious charities, or families whose ownership records predated interstellar government. The Varkesh intercepted Terran communications and reached an obvious conclusion. The human fleet lacked unified control. They were correct. They were also wrong about what that meant. The Varkesh command structure resembled a blade. Orders moved downward from central war mines. Every ship occupied a defined role. The system was fast, disciplined, and powerful. Terran mobilization resembled weather. Central command issued objectives, routes, threat assessments, and legal authorities. Regional coordinators translated them into tasks. Captains formed local agreements, exchanged information, and adapted without waiting for permission. No one commanded the whole storm. Everyone understood where it needed to go. Varkesh intelligence identified Continuity Group 7 as an ideal target. It contained irreplaceable industrial equipment and more than 80,000 civilians, yet only 12 formal escorts. An enemy strike group of 40 warships entered the system ahead of the convoy. Captain Ward received the warning 6 minutes before emergence. Lieutenant Ito projected the threat paths. "We cannot turn the convoy in time. Can the escorts hold them?" "Not for long." Ward looked at the ships around him. The official defensive plan required the civilians to scatter while escorts delayed the attackers. Scattering would destroy the convoy's mutual support and leave slower ships exposed. Ward opened the neighborhood channel. "All captains, this is Cedar Falls. We have 40 hostile ships ahead. Escorts will not be sufficient. We are implementing harbor defense. Confirm your assigned roles." The responses came immediately. Mining vessels moved to the front and released clouds of metallic ore fragments into predicted approach lanes. Tugs repositioned empty cargo modules as improvised barriers. Survey ships flooded local space with false sensor contacts. Fuel haulers vented narrow streams of hydrogen that distorted targeting systems when ignited. University vessels deployed research drones in coordinated swarms. Passenger liners and hospital ships moved into the center. Freighters formed layers around them. The neighborhood became a fortress assembled from objects that had never been designed to meet. The Varkesh arrived expecting prey. Their lead formation struck the ore cloud at combat velocity. Shields flared. Sensors degraded. Terran escorts fired from concealed positions behind cargo modules. Then the civilian fleet joined them. Industrial lasers meant for cutting rock burned through exposed radiators. Tug tractors twisted damaged enemy vessels away from formation. Repair drones attached explosive bolts to hull seams. Courier ships raced through the battle carrying targeting updates when jamming overwhelmed the network. The Cedar Falls launched defensive missiles until the cargo module was empty. A Varships cruiser broke through and aimed toward the hospital ships. Ward watched its weapons charge. "Baco, can we ram it?" he asked. The engineer did not waste time objecting. "Not without killing us. We can throw something heavier." The Cedar Falls still carried an empty grain container weighing 9,000 tons. Baco released it, and the tugs altered its trajectory. The container crossed the cruiser's path with no guidance system, no explosive, and no military designation. The Varships cruiser attempted to evade. It was too late. 9,000 tons of agricultural hardware struck its forward shield at relative velocity high enough to turn accounting equipment into a strategic weapon. The cruiser spun out of formation. Terran escorts finished it. The battle lasted 27 minutes. 12 Varships ships escaped. The neighborhood lost 3 freighters and 1 mining vessel. Every crew was recovered. Grand Admiral Von watched the battle, recording twice. His tactical chief called it an improvised civilian defense. Von corrected him. "Improvised means they invented it today," he said. "They had names for every maneuver." Admiral Morita confirmed his suspicion. Harbor defense was taught in Merchant Reserve certification. The humans had practiced defending convoys with cargo, tools, and local coordination for generations. They had simply never counted those exercises as naval readiness. Chapter 7. The Arithmetic of Production. The war entered its 4th month. The Varships continued advancing, but the conquered refused to collapse. Captured systems yielded fewer resources than projected. Destroyed depots were replaced by mobile stores. Damaged warships returned to combat faster than Varships analysts considered possible. Then the numbers changed. At the beginning of the war, the conquered had fielded 28,000 active warships. By the 4th month, despite catastrophic losses, it possessed 31,000. Most new hulls were Terran. Grand Admiral Von traveled to Sol to understand how. Earth's famous naval yards accounted for only a fraction of production. The rest emerged from places the Fleet Balance Report had not classified as military construction. Commercial stations assembled standardized hull sections. Mining colonies fabricated armor plate. Habitat foundries produced reactor components. Agricultural worlds manufactured life support cartridges. Small orbital docks built corvettes from modular plans distributed across the Union. No single facility appeared decisive. Together, they produced a river of ships. Von toured the Tacoma Orbital Cooperative, where workers had built passenger ferries before the invasion. The main assembly hall now produced escort frigates. The cooperative director, Amara Singh, greeted him in a hard hat and work clothes. "How long did conversion take?" Von asked. 11 days. Your facility was designed for civilian hulls. It still builds civilian hulls. The frigate uses the same pressure sections, power trunks, and control architecture. We changed the outer frame and installed military modules. Von watched a new ship move through the line. Does standardization not limit performance? Of course, a purpose-built warship is better at being a warship. A standardized ship is better at existing when you need 10,000 of them. The answer summarized the entire Terran strategy. Other civilizations pursued perfection. Their warships were masterpieces optimized over decades. Human ships often appeared inelegant by comparison. Humanity had optimized the system that produced ships. Von returned to combined fleet command with revised estimates. If the war lasted another year, Terran output would exceed the Varships replacement rate. The enemy reached the same conclusion. They changed objectives. Instead of attacking fleets, the Varships prepared a strike against Earth. Not because Earth contained the largest shipyards, because they believed destroying the political center would break human coordination. The Varships assembled 20,000 combat ships for the assault on Sol. Conquered intelligence detected the movement too late to concentrate enough formal warships. The combined fleet could place perhaps 8,000 combatants in defense. Von informed the Emergency Council that the odds were unacceptable. Councillor Thane asked him to define acceptable. "A defender normally requires comparable force when protecting a fixed system," Von replied. Thane looked toward Admiral Morita. "How many ships are currently inside one jump of Sol?" Morita consulted the mobilization network. "Military vessels, 7,812. "That was not my question." She changed the filter. The projection filled with points. Cargo carriers, tugs, ferries, construction barges, patrol craft, reserve ships, hospital vessels, mining fleets, private couriers, colonial transports, training ships, orbital service craft. 186,000 human-controlled vessels operated within one jump of Sol. Most could not fight, everyone could contribute. Vaughn stared at the display. For 40 years, he had defined fleet strength by counting weapons. Humanity defined it by counting hands. Chapter 8, The Battle of Sol. The Varkesh entered Sol in perfect formation. 20,000 black warships emerged beyond Neptune and began accelerating inward. Their strategic broadcast demanded surrender of the Terran government and disarmament of all human forces. Earth transmitted no speech in response. Admiral Morita issued a navigation notice. All civilian traffic, Sol Defense Condition 1, execute assigned continuity TASKS, maintain local command, protect life. The system moved. Outer system mining fleets released sensor buoys and concealed defensive platforms among asteroids. Fuel haulers dispersed into thousands of small depots. Tugs shifted ice, ore, and abandoned equipment into controlled trajectories. Civilian observatories joined the targeting network. Cargo ships evacuated habitats and then returned carrying ammunition. The Varkesh expected a central defensive line. They found layers. At Neptune, unmanned mining equipment forced them to deploy screening vessels. Near Uranus, survey craft and telescopes tracked their formation through electronic warfare. At Saturn, mobile missile modules fired from beneath the rings and relocated before counterattack. At Jupiter, the combined fleet struck. Grand Admiral Vaughn commanded the main engagement from the Nethari battleship Unbroken Oath. Terran, Asari, Pelagic, Vair, and Nethari formations attacked together. The battle should have decided the system. Instead, it became one part of a larger machine. Whenever conquered ships withdrew, civilian repair groups met them behind the line. Damaged vessels received fuel, crew, missiles, and replacement modules before returning to combat. Casualties moved toward hospitals. Data traveled through independent networks. Destroyed relays were replaced by courier webs. The Varkesh broke through at 3 points. There was no empty rear area waiting behind them. Every moon, station, tug route, cargo yard, and construction platform had become part of the defense. Captain Ward commanded a logistics group near Mars. The Cedar Falls had been repaired, repainted, and loaded with missiles again. Her crew had spent 4 months at war and still argued about whether the coffee machine violated power regulations. Lieutenant Ito detected 6 Varkesh destroyers moving toward a refugee stream from the outer habitats. "No naval units are close enough," she reported. Ward opened the local network. "Available ships near Route Red 9, identify capability." Replies filled the channel. 2 customs cutters, 4 asteroid tugs, a training cruiser with cadets aboard, 9 cargo ships, a luxury liner carrying no passengers because its captain had returned after evacuation, a maintenance swarm controlled by 3 teenagers at a lunar technical college. Ward organized them in less than a minute. The customs cutters attacked first, forcing the Varkesh to turn. Tugs launched decoy heat sources. Cargo ships deployed defensive drones. The training cruiser fired from long range, while instructors and cadets shared stations. The luxury liner accelerated directly toward the refugee route. Its captain opened a broad channel. "This is Star of Venice. We are extending our drive field around the evacuation ships. Anyone who damages the paint will receive a bill." The liner's civilian field generator had been designed to provide a smooth ride for wealthy passengers. Engineers had modified it into a shield amplifier. It held long enough. Ward's missiles arrived. The Varkesh destroyers died within sight of Mars. Across Sol, similar engagements unfolded without waiting for orders from Earth. The Varkesh continued inward, losing ships at every layer, their formation compressed. Their commanders demanded tighter control. Communication delays grew. Local units hesitated when reality differed from central plans. Human units did the opposite. They became more independent as the battle fragmented. By the time the Varkesh reached the inner system, fewer than 9,000 ships remained combat effective. The combined fleet still possessed 6,000 formal warships. Behind them moved a civilization. Vaughn ordered the final attack. Warships struck the enemy center. Merchant auxiliaries flooded damaged formations with ammunition. Tugs dragged disabled ships out and fresh ships in. Civilian sensors exposed Varkesh command vessels. Construction craft deployed prefabricated missile racks around the battlefield faster than enemy targeting systems could classify them. The Varkesh war mind transmitted a message to Admiral Morita. "Your fleet has no coherent structure," Morita answered while tracking the collapse of its formation. "It has a purpose. No central command directs these vessels. They know what they are protecting." The war mind delayed before responding. "How many military ships does humanity possess?" Morita looked across the tactical display. Warships, freighters, tugs, ferries, hospitals, couriers, mining platforms, and civilian craft shared the same battle space. Today, she asked. All of them. The Varkesh formation broke 20 minutes later. Chapter 9, The Count. The Varkesh withdrew from Saul with fewer than 4,000 ships. The conquered pursued for 3 months. Without the momentum of conquest, the migrating empire fractured. Subject populations rebelled. Supply formations surrendered. Varkesh commanders discovered that terror maintained obedience only while victory appeared inevitable. The war ended at Cinder Reach, where it had begun. Grand Admiral Vaughn stood aboard the restored listening station as the final armistice was signed. Captain Ward attended as one of several civilian representatives. The Cedar Falls waited outside with patched armor and a new cargo of grain. After the ceremony, Vaughn found Ward near an observation window. "Your ship is returning to commerce," the Admiral asked. "Tomorrow morning." "After everything it has done?" Ward looked genuinely confused. "People still need food." Vaughn watched freighters moving through the reopened corridor. "Will you remove the weapons?" "Most of them." "The defensive mounts stay certified." "And your commission?" "Reserve status. Annual training begins in 6 months." The fleet was dissolving around them. Passenger liners restored cabins. Mining vessels returned to ore fields. Mobile hospitals became disaster response ships. Factories resumed civilian production. Reserve crews went home, carrying uniforms in luggage beside work clothes. To Vaughn, it felt like watching an ocean disappear into rain. The Concord ordered a new fleet balance report. This time, the committee included economists, engineers, labor representatives, civil defense planners, merchant captains, and one extremely patient Terran insurance lawyer. They spent 8 months debating what counted as military power. Warships remained easy. Everything else resisted measurement. Was a cargo vessel a military asset if it could carry missiles but normally carried fruit? Was a university ship part of the fleet because its sensors had tracked enemy vessels? Did industrial capacity count as ships that existed, ships that could exist, or factories capable of changing what existence meant? Could volunteer coordination be treated as readiness when participation was not guaranteed? The committee produced 900 pages and no single ranking. Councillor Thane considered that progress. At the public hearing, a reporter asked Admiral Morita whether humanity had deliberately concealed the size of its fleet. "No," she replied. "We submitted every vessel record the Concord requested." "But you knew the ranking was misleading." "We knew the ranking measured navies. It claimed to measure navies. Humanity was listed in 12th place. That was accurate. Then who had the largest fleet?" Morita paused long enough for the room to quiet. "Before the war, no one. Fleets are organizations created for a purpose. Humanity had ships, standards, laws, training, and relationships. The invasion gave them a shared purpose. So the fleet did not exist until it was needed." "Parts of it existed. The whole did not," the reporter frowned. "That sounds like a technical answer." "It is the honest one." Grand Admiral Von testified next. He brought the original fleet balance report with him. "I trusted this document," he said. "Its figures were correct. Its conclusion was useless." He displayed 2 images. The first showed the Terran Union Navy before the invasion, 812 warships arranged by class. The second showed the defense of Saul. The projection could not display every vessel individually without turning the system into a sphere of light. "We asked how many weapons humanity controlled," Vaughn said. "We should have asked how much of human civilization could move, adapt, repair, supply, shelter, build, communicate, and choose to cooperate under pressure." He closed the old report. "We counted the swords. We forgot to count the hands that could carry them." Epilogue, everything else. 20 years after the war, cadets at the Concord Naval Academy studied the Battle of Saul. The lecture hall contained students from 17 species. At the front stood retired Grand Admiral Sarek Vaughn, older now and supported by a polished cane. A tactical reconstruction hovered above them. One cadet raised a hand. "Admiral, records state that humanity entered the war with the 12th-largest navy and ended it with the largest fleet in known history. Which figure should we use on the examination?" Vaughn looked toward the projection. Tiny lights represented the formal warships. Millions of dimmer points represented everything supporting them. "Use both," he said. "Then explain why neither tells the entire truth." Another cadet asked whether the Terrans could mobilize the same force again. "No," Vaughn replied. The room stirred. He smiled. "They would mobilize a different force. Their ships have changed. Their laws have changed. Their people have changed. That is what we failed to understand. We expected a hidden fleet waiting in darkness." He tapped his cane against the floor. "Humanity did not hide the galaxy's largest fleet. The reconstruction shifted to an image of the Cedar Falls carrying grain through peaceful space. They hid nothing. We looked directly at their civilization and saw only civilians. Outside the Academy windows, a passenger liner crossed the sky beside an orbital tug. Neither carried weapons. Both maintained reserve communication links. Both used standardized docking systems. Both crews trained once a year for evacuation, disaster response, and fleet coordination. Neither captain expected war. That was not the same as being unprepared. Vaughn dismissed the class and remained beneath the fading projection. The old fleet balance report had been placed in the Academy Museum, its Terran entry still read. Active warships 812. Rank 12. The museum had added one sentence beneath it. Every number was correct. That was why the mistake mattered.